Welcome to Le Weekend, your essential roundup of French news on culture, business, the economy, and current affairs. We bring you a convenient way to catch up on the stories from the past week in France, plus an additional focus feature blending reportage and cultural context. You'll find a seamless recap of the week's most important headlines without losing any content from our previous daily format, perfect for those who want to catch up in just one episode. Le Weekend is designed to keep you informed and engaged with a lighter touch at the end. Let's dive in. These are the headlines on Monday, May 11th. President Emmanuel Macron announced 23 billion euros, approximately $27 billion of investment for Africa during a major summit on the future of the continent hosted by Kenya. The investments announced include 14 billion euros in private and public funds from French entities and 9 billion euros from African investors, as reported by Le Monde. Faced with soaring fuel prices, more French people will be helped in the coming weeks. Government spokesperson Maud Brejean ruled out blanket measures, saying the government aims to help the most vulnerable sectors, as reported by BFM. French families filed a complaint against TikTok over teen self-harm and suicides. 16 French families have filed a complaint for exploitation of vulnerability, the second such collective complaint by families who say their children harmed themselves or ended their lives allegedly because of content they consumed on the TikTok platform, as reported by RFI. These are the headlines on Tuesday, May 12th. Gaming clubs officially set up shop in Paris. In early 2026, 7 gaming establishments where slot machines are prohibited were made permanent after an 8-year trial period. The massive Partouche Casino Club, which is not a traditional casino, will have had its grand opening on Tuesday, as reported by Le Monde. French Parliament summoned TotalEnergies CEO over the Iran windfall profits. CEO Patrick Pouyanné was summoned to the Assemblée Nationale's Finance Committee as French energy group TotalEnergies faced calls for a windfall tax after reporting massive profits linked to the current Middle East war, as reported by Le Monde. A man was arrested on suspicion of plotting a Paris attack inspired by jihadism. French police have detained a man suspected of plotting a jihadist-inspired attack, with the Louvre reportedly a possible target, as reported by RFI. The headlines on Wednesday, May 13th. Stars descended on the carpet as the Cannes Film Festival 2026 opened without Hollywood backing. As usual in the build-up to the festival, off-screen events have dominated the conversation, from the impact of AI on jobs, Hollywood's decision to ghost the event as far as premieres are concerned, to the underrepresentation of women directors, as reported by Le Monde. Former Prime Minister Gabriel Attal was moved a step closer to a likely presidential bid after the ruling Renaissance Party's National Council formally called on him to run in the 2027 election, further consolidating his grip on the party founded by incumbent President Emmanuel Macron, as reported by RFI. France confined over 1,700 people on a cruise ship after a suspected norovirus death. About 50 other people have shown symptoms of norovirus on the Ambassador cruise line ship, currently docked in the southern French city of Bordeaux, as reported by Le Monde. The cruise ship, in related news, was later released to continue its itinerary on Thursday. These are the headlines on Thursday, May 14th. Health authorities in France said the hantavirus outbreak is under control as infection remains isolated. The remarks came after a French woman who traveled aboard the cruise ship MV Ondieu developed a severe case of hantavirus, with officials stressing there is no evidence the virus is circulating in the country, as reported by RFI. The Ascension Day long weekend caused over 1,300 kilometers, approximately 800 miles of traffic jams. The Ascension Day holiday and the 4-day school closure led to a significant increase in travel throughout the country, as reported by Le Figaro. The unemployment rate in France exceeded 8%, its highest level since 2021. Unemployment has been steadily increasing since the fourth quarter of 2024, when it was at 7.3%, with young people being the hardest hit, as reported by Le Figaro. The headlines on Friday, May 15th. Luxury group LVMH announced that it had reached an agreement to sell its Marc Jacobs brand to the diversified American holding company WHP Global. The amount of the transaction was not disclosed, but a valuation last year reportedly set the number at around $1 billion, as reported by Les Echos. School uniforms have limited effects on student behavior and learning, according to a French experiment with a standard uniform launched in 2023 that involved about 100 elementary, middle, and high schools. The first study on the measure highlights significant differences in perception between adults and students and found modest and mixed impacts on the school environment, as reported by Le Monde. Soaring prices at the pump are beginning to cast a heavy shadow over summer plans. According to a survey, a majority of French people have already scaled back their holiday plans, while some are now considering not going away at all in the summer, as reported by Capital. You are listening to Le Weekend. And now that you're all caught up with the news from this past week, it's time for our bonus story. Today we look at why a firing built an empire. On the morning of May 14th, a press release announced something that had been coming for a long time. LVMH, Louis Vuitton Moet Hennessy, the world's largest luxury goods group, announced it was selling its Marc Jacobs brand to WHP Global, a New York-based brand management firm. The transaction, said to be valued at somewhere between 850 million and 1 billion, according to sources cited by the Wall Street Journal, ended a relationship nearly 30 years in the making. Marc Jacobs himself issued a statement saying, "I am forever grateful to Bernard Arnault for his support, belief and trust in me over the last 30 years. In fashion that is equivalent to a love letter for someone who remembers where it all began and how badly it nearly ended." To understand why this relationship mattered, we have to go back to a runway in New York City in 1993. Marc Jacobs was 29 years old and already carrying the weight of expectation. A graduate of Parsons School of Design, he had collected accolades as a student, built a reputation as someone worth watching, and landed one of the most coveted positions in American sportswear, head designer at Perry Ellis. The brand was polished, preppy, commercial, and Jacobs was its creative lead. Out of Seattle, something else was happening. Nirvana had changed the frequency of popular culture. Thrift stores were being raided for flannel shirts. Beauty was being redefined as deliberate ugliness. Grunge was a posture, a refusal, and Marc Jacobs wanted to bring it to the runway. What followed was one of the most controversial runway shows of the decade. Jacobs sent out slip dresses layered over flannel shirts, heavy boots, slouchy silhouettes. Hair was messy, makeup was minimal, the soundtrack was grunge. Models such as Christy Turlington, Kate Moss, or Naomi Campbell wore clothes that looked like they'd been pulled from a vintage bin, remade in silk. And that was precisely the point. Jacobs had taken banal, everyday references and elevated them to designer status, a maneuver that could almost be seen as philosophical. What is luxury, after all, if not the ability to make something ordinary feel extraordinary? The critics, however, disagreed. Fashion writer Cathy Horan was unsparing. Grunge is anathema to fashion, she said. Rarely has slovenliness looked so self-conscious or commanded so high a price. The collection was never put into production. Jacobs was fired. In a particularly modern footnote, pieces from the collection were reportedly inspired by Kurt Cobain and Courtney Love, but the brand decided he had gone too far and the pieces he sent them were burned, according to The Guardian. By any reasonable measure, this kind of spectacular failure ends careers. Jacobs later said to the New York Times, "I never had any idea I would be fired. But it is still my favorite collection because it marked a time when I went with my instincts against instructions and I turned out to be right." The Perry Ellis firing became fashion's most cited cautionary tale, except the lesson kept reversing itself. In the years that followed, grunge became mainstream. The aesthetic Jacobs was punished for predicting took over the decade. And slowly the critical consensus began to shift. Even Horan eventually came around, writing in 2015 that she had ignored the charm and sweetness of the attitude in the original Jacobs show. Perry Ellis itself later acknowledged that the collection had changed the direction of contemporary women's wear. But the most significant consequence of that firing wasn't the critical rehabilitation, but what happened 4 years later when Louis Vuitton came calling. In January 1997, after months of speculation and negotiation, Marc Jacobs was appointed as Louis Vuitton's first ever creative director. His brief was extraordinary in its scope. Build a ready-to-wear line from the ground up for a house that, until that moment, had never staged a catwalk show and had no ready-to-wear atelier as such. Louis Vuitton was, at its core, a luggage and leather goods company. The iconic monogram canvas, the interlocking LV and flower pattern designed by Georges Vuitton in 1896, was globally recognized. But it was leather goods, trunks, and travel accessories that defined the brand. Fashion, in the modern sense, didn't exist there yet. Jacobs arrived with a small team and a blank canvas. As he later told in conversation with Pharrell Williams, "We had to start an atelier. There was no Vuitton atelier. All the different LVMH brands operate separately. So it wasn't like, oh, they have a great atelier over at Dior, they're going to help us out. It was like, no, that's not the way it goes. We had to build it." What Jacobs built would change the brand permanently. He boosted Louis Vuitton's profit during his tenure. He introduced collaborations that are now studied in business school. Graffiti print bags with Steven Sprouse, the multicolor monogram canvas with Takashi Murakami, which the LVMH annual report in 2003 described as an extraordinary magnet for contemporary energy. Prints with Richard Prince, dotted canvases with Yayoi Kusama. Each collaboration brought a new audience to Louis Vuitton without alienating the old one, a balance that is rare in luxury fashion. A new generation of luxury shoppers was drawn to Louis Vuitton, attracted by Jacobs' innovative perspective. He understood something that not every designer grasps, that the most valuable thing in fashion, beyond the product itself, is the cultural conversation around it. By the time Jacobs left Louis Vuitton in October 2013, after 16 years, to focus on his own brand, the house had over 460 stores across 50 countries. and was the undisputed crown jewel of the group that owned it. So let's look at the group itself a little more closely. LVMH, Moet Hennessy Louis Vuitton, is a number that resists comprehension until you break it into parts. Founded in 1987 from the merger between Louis Vuitton and Moet Hennessy, it has since become something closer to a civilization than a company. It currently houses 75 prestigious brands under a single roof: Louis Vuitton, Christian Dior, Givenchy, Fendi, Celine, Loro Piana, Loewe, Bulgari, Tag Heuer, Tiffany & Company, Moët Chandon, Dom Pérignon, Hennessy, Sephora, and, until yesterday, Marc Jacobs. These brands span fashion, leather goods, wines and spirits, watches, jewelry, perfume, cosmetics, and selective retail. In 2024, LVMH reported revenue of 84.7 billion euros, roughly equivalent to the entire GDP of a mid-sized European nation. That figure represents 1% organic growth in a difficult year amid a pullback in Chinese luxury spending and post-pandemic normalization. Profit from recurrent operations were 19.6 billion euros. The group's retail network stretched to over 6,300 stores worldwide. By any measure, this is the largest luxury goods operation ever assembled. At the very top of that empire, as its most valuable asset, sits Louis Vuitton. Its brand value in 2024 was estimated at 129.9 billion euros, the highest of any luxury brand in the world, ahead of Hermès at 93.7 billion. The transformation Jacobs set in motion from luggage house to global fashion icon is a significant part of why that number is so large. Which brings us back to this press release this past week. Within the architecture of LVMH, Marc Jacobs was always occupying an interesting position. LVMH acquired its majority stake in the brand in 1997. The same year, Jacobs joined Louis Vuitton, effectively making the designer's personal label a house brand within the empire he was simultaneously helping to build. For years, the arrangement made sense, but as the brand's profile evolved, it became something that sat awkwardly between accessible luxury and high fashion, never quite finding the clarity of positioning that LVMH's flagship names command. As one industry analyst put it recently, for LVMH, Marc Jacobs was more of a hobby than a priority. That's perhaps harsh, but it is inevitable that LVMH's attention, its capital, prestige flows towards its star brands. LVMH's own stated strategy has long been to develop its star brands, and Marc Jacobs, for all its cultural cachet, did not appear to be groomed as one of them. WHP Global, the new buyer, is a different kind of organization, a brand management company whose portfolio includes Vera Wang, Rag & Bone, and G-Star. It operates with a commercial instinct that sees a label like Marc Jacobs not as fashion house requiring careful curation, but as a scalable asset with licensing potential. A major perfume and cosmetics license with Coty, including a long-awaited return of Marc Jacobs Beauty, is already rumored to be one of the significant early moves. Jacobs himself will remain as creative director. The deal, structured as a joint venture with G3 Apparel Group, values the transaction at approximately $1 billion. There is something almost circular about this story. A young designer is fired for trusting his instincts. Those instincts turn out to be exactly right. The prestige that the firing generates in its strange way makes him attractive to the most powerful man in luxury. He rebuilds an institution. His own label grows in the shadow of that institution. And then 30 years later, the institution sells the label to a company better suited to commercialize what he built. Fashion, more than most industries, runs on reputation. The Perry Ellis collection of 1993 shouldn't have launched a career, it should have ended one. Instead, it became the foundation of a legend, and that says something about the difference between being right and being understood, and the gap in time that separates the two. There is a neat symmetry to it. A designer fired for trusting his instincts, then rewarded for the same instinct when the industry finally catches up. Jacobs has become one of those rare figures whose early setback turned out to be the first chapter of the myth, and this latest page could be the start of a whole new chapter. Thank you for listening to Le Weekend, your one-stop destination for the main headlines in France. Catch our weekly roundup every weekend wherever you get your podcasts. Stay informed.